Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar Demystifying Academic Processes with Sage Publishing and GSU's Diverse Faculty Alliance. My name's Michael Todd, and I'm the Social Science Communications Manager at Sage, and I'll be the moderator today. Now, to get started, I'm going to pass it over to GSU's Laura Edmonds, who's Professor of English Comparative Literature, and Curtis Bird, the Special Advisor to the Provost for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, for further introductions. Take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. On behalf of the entire Diverse Faculty Alliance, I'd like to welcome you to today's session on demystifying academic processes, from publishing your research to promoting it. The Diverse Faculty Alliance at Georgia State University advocates for building community, supporting professional development, and organizing networking, social, and support activities for underrepresented minorities and other groups of faculty represented in the Alliance. These groups were created based on recommendations from the Implementation Committee of Georgia State's Commission on the Next Generation of Faculty, and the topics developed for this webinar are ideas from members of the DFA. The Diverse Faculty Alliance membership is comprised of the leadership from each faculty identity or affinity group at our institution, and those groups are FADA, the Faculty of the African Diaspora, the Women's Interest Faculty Group, LACHI, that is our Latin, Chicano, Caribbean, Hispanic, and Indigenous Affinity Group, AFIG, the Asian American Faculty Identity Group, PRISM, Pride, Inclusion, Respect, Support, and Movement Faculty and Staff Group, and GSU VETS, the Georgia State University Veteran Employees Team Support Group. If you would like to join or have any questions for one of these organizations, please reach out to us at dei.gsu.edu. Thanks so much. Curtis, you're up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Curtis Bird. I'm the Special Advisor to the Provost and often the President on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Georgia State University. And I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists today. So let me get started. First, we start with Dr. Dawn Rowe, who is an associate professor in the Department of Educational Foundations and Special Education at East Tennessee State University. Dr. Rowe serves as the academic editor for the Council of Exceptional Children Research to Practice Journal and Teaching Exceptional Children. Next, we have Dr. Cristina De Silva, is a professor of the practice of learning, diversity, and urban studies. She's the editor of the volume of Redesigning Teacher Preparation for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Young Students, an ecological approach. She's been the associate editor for the Journal of Literacy Research and Urban Education Journal. Next, we have, and if I get this name wrong, don't forgive me, Dr. Norma Collier. She's the former president of the National Association of Hispanic Nurses, a leader for diversity in nursing. She has over 60 peer-reviewed publications and has been the editor for the Journal of Transcultural Nursing for 7 years. We also have Jessica Lipewski, and sorry for that, is the publisher of the editor. Did I get it right? I got it wrong, didn't I? I'm sorry. Is the publishing editor and manages a range of science and medicine journals, working with editors and societies to develop new strategies and problem solve. During her time at Sage, she has helped to create and develop resources to help early career researchers better understand the publishing process. And lastly, but not least, is Karen Schreier, who manages and acquires journals in education and special education for Sage. As a publishing editor, she works closely with associations to manage the business and editorial development of their journals. So thank you so much, panelists. I really appreciate it. We all appreciate it from Georgia State. And back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Curtis. This 1-hour webinar is going to be recorded and it will be archived for future viewing. And we will be sending out a link to view it to all registrants in the coming weeks. And if any of you have any problems with audio or viewing mode during the webinar, please use the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. It may move around, but it's probably on the right side of your screen. And one of our helpful team members will get back to you ASAP. And at the end of the webinar, about 45 minutes in, we plan on having some time for Q&A from attendees. So please also use that Q&A box to ask any question to speakers throughout the webinar. So you don't have to wait till 45 minutes. You can do it ahead of time and we'll just bank them. And without further ado, let's get started. And I believe it's to you, Jessica.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It is an absolute pleasure to be here today to speak with all of you. I really look forward to this fruitful discussion and welcome all the questions that might come up. But hopefully we can provide some fantastic tips and resources for your consideration. So just to kick us off, before we get into a deeper discussion, just wanted to touch base on an introduction to how to get published. I'm sure most people here have already been published or are in the process of publishing their work as faculty, but one of the number one things I wanted to hone in on today and focus on is finding that right home for your paper. So thinking about these different factors to help you to determine to which journal you should submit. So when thinking about this, you're probably already familiar with different publications in your field, but thinking about what articles you are referencing and in which journals they are published, might that be a good fit? As you're exploring these journals and narrowing things down, take a really close look at the aims and scope of the publication. Does the journal that you are looking to publish in even publish that type of paper you're working on? Some journals publish case reports or brief reports while others do not. What do your peers say about the journal? And maybe your institution has restrictions on where you can submit your articles. Maybe it requires a certain metric, like an impact factor requirement, or maybe your funder requires an open access license under the Creative Commons license. And after you've narrowed down your search and you maybe have one or two journals to which you're looking to submit, the number one thing I hear from editors and associate editors is to please read and follow the manuscript submission guidelines. I cannot emphasize enough how much editors appreciate the effort that you put in. And if you don't end up following the guidelines, there's a very large chance that your paper might be sent back for adjustments before even being considered and before even potentially going through that peer review process. And so be sure to tailor your manuscript accordingly to the journal to which you are looking to submit. On top of that, I know time to publication is often a consideration or a concern when you're looking to submit to a journal. Some journals publish this on their website, so you can go to the journal homepage, like on Sage Journals. We have that. If you scroll down, some journals choose to publish that on the homepage or in the author guidelines. This ultimately is up to the editorial office if they want to promote those metrics. You could also reach out to the editorial office to ask for additional information if you're looking for that time to publication. But one thing I did want to emphasize is just with the global climate and what we're facing right now, as you can tell, we're all here from home or are working remotely, and peer review can definitely take time to come back with that first or final decision for that paper. And so you can always reach out to editorial offices and follow up, but do understand, and as we all know, we're facing a very different world right now, and so peer review can be delayed. I won't take up too much time. We have some great advice coming up here over the course of this webinar, but I do want to give a shout out to our Sage Author Gateway. We have an incredible amount of resources available, including we've hosted webinars, we have a 3-part video series, a PDF guide, tips to promote your article. And I know we'll send out these links later, but I just wanted to encourage you to check out the resources we do have. But with that, I would love to pass the ball over to Norma to share some of her tips, tricks, and feedbacks being an editor of a journal.
Thank you, Jessica. And just so you know, my last name is Cuellar. It's Spanish. And so if you've taken some Spanish courses, you might figure that out. But I was raised in Mississippi, and I'll take just about anything. It's even gotten to cellular, which is like a cellular telephone, but that's where I have to stop and say, no, that's not right. But I'm the editor of the Journal of Transcultural Nursing, and I want to thank Sage and Georgia State for inviting me to be here. We publish articles about cultural congruent healthcare. And when I look at the consortium that Georgia State has just mentioned and talked about, all of you could have, would probably have your research would fit into my journal. The thing about the journal is that we look at culturally congruent healthcare. And if you don't mention culture, or if you don't mention how it impacts culture, it's not a good fit. So you have to mention that. But the question we're focusing on right now is how to get published. And Jessica just mentioned the start of that. And so I'm going to come along with that. Until you've really published a lot, you're probably not a good writer. I mean, we all need to write, and we all need to practice writing. And I'm still not a good writer. I can read and edit, but it's really difficult to write for me sometimes. And getting an editor is so important, especially if English is your second language. So having someone read it as a professional can help you get through some of that, shorten that review process. Having peer reviewers look at it before you submit it will help. I always tell my students when they want to publish something, get someone to review it, have them have it back to you in a week, and make those changes. That decreases your time that the journal's going to have to do, which could take weeks and months even. So if you do your own peer review before you submit it, that's really a good plan if you want to move that process along. Don't ask your mother to be a peer reviewer. That doesn't work, okay? You need to get someone that's going to read it and critique it. Don't get someone that you know is just doesn't have time and say, oh, it looks fine. You want someone to really tear it up, if you will. So make sure you have that. I don't know if y'all have heard about the consort guidelines. These are very important, and they were developed several years ago when evidence-based research started coming out. And what it provides specific guidelines so that we can compare apples and apples. Before, people would publish their research and they may leave out certain very important concepts that add to the research integrity. When you follow the consort guidelines, you have included everything that you need in your type of design. When you go to the Equator, it's called Equator Guidelines, you have a whole list of different type of methodologies that you should follow, for herbal therapy, for acupuncture, for research, clinical trials. I mean, there's over, I think last I looked, there was over like 200 of them. But if you follow those guidelines, you will make sure to include everything you need for a publication. And if you say we followed the consort guidelines, it adds integrity. It adds that research integrity that you need for your research. With that said, always publish. You don't have to publish alone. Nowadays, if I see someone that's a sole author, it doesn't add as much credence as if it's me and maybe a psychologist and a statistician and someone that has worked collaboratively. So don't hesitate to get someone to write with you, and I encourage that. And when you do your editorship, if you are leading that, you be the first author, and don't be scared to ask for that. But there are COPE guidelines that look at ethics and look at how you determine authorship. And it's very important that you determine authorship before you write that paper. You need to make sure, and it's just like, how much money do I need to pay you to paint my house? It may be uncomfortable, but you have to get these things written out. Now, in the process of submitting, my journal, my average time to get a report back to our authors is 6 weeks. All right, that's not bad. That's not bad. But we have a lot of process in place. So 6 weeks to get the first result back. Now, granted, it's probably going to be major revisions or minor revisions. Does not mean that you're going to get accepted. I mean, I've probably had maybe 1 article, maybe 2 articles that have gotten accepted first draft. So, but keep in mind that process is an important time process, because we consider you guys our customer. Y'all are our customer, and we want to make sure that we are providing you a service that you can get through and you can get what you need as quick as possible. It's up to you to how fast you respond. I would recommend that you wait no more than 2 weeks if you really want to push this through. If you wait too long, we may reject it because you haven't followed the guidelines that say we need to hear back from you in such and such time. So be careful about, returning that and getting it back to us. Initially, your feelings are going to be hurt, no doubt. I mean, no doubt. Don't just know that, dang it, why didn't they accept this firsthand? And they want me to do major revisions. I just can't do that. Just put it aside. Wait 48 hours, 2 or 3 days, whatever, come back to it and make the revisions and do what the editors or the reviewers tell you. If they have said something that is totally out, you just say, I'm not going to change this, or I can't change this because X, Y, Z. So, and I would say always have a statistician. If you're doing quantitative analysis, always have a statistician. So I could go on. This is a question that could be a whole hour or longer. But Christina, I'll send it to you and see what you the question is, what recommendations is it to get your research published?
Thank you so much, Norma. I actually enjoyed your points so much because they really ring so true. Thank you, everybody, for having me as a panelist today. It's lovely to be with you. And my name is Ana Cristina da Silva, and I am in the field of education. And so my particular area of research is literacy education. And for the last 15 years, I have been either editor or associate editor for journals such as the Journal of Literacy Research, and currently I am the associate editor for Urban Education. Both of those journals are located in the field of education, and they are really top-tier journals in the field. So just there's very few things to really add to Norma's talk today, because she was so thorough and so concise and right on point. But a few things that I think that I could add, perhaps just through my experience of being an editor for this long, is that one of the things that we really look very closely before we even send it to the reviewers is, does the publication or the manuscript meet the criteria of the journal? And Jessica spoke to this also, in that you have to read that very closely, because we receive over 500 manuscripts a year, and only 20 of those manuscripts are going to make the cut. Through the year, right? Since we have 4 issues. And so what's going to make your manuscript different or worthy or merit the publication? And 480 of them not. So we have to think about what might be some of the things that distinguish your manuscript from others. So one of the things that we look at very closely, even before we send out to reviewers, is, does the research question align with the methodology? And does the methodology really reveal the kinds of insight that the author is claiming as the main arguments? So that tightness and conciseness it's not as easy to achieve as it is to talk about it, because we sometimes are so ingrained in our own work and we know it so fully, so well, that sometimes we fail to make it transparent to the public, you know, how we get there. How do we get to these arguments, to these insights, to some of these conclusions? And so to be very, very thorough in your methodology. That's the desk rejects most of the time are for two reasons. One is that the manuscript has not been properly blinded. And so be sure that your name does not appear anywhere when you're sending it out. Sometimes you just do it, you know, as a mistake. Sometimes we send it back to you, say, hey, can you blind it, and send it back to us. And the second reason is because the methodology is not very well delineated, and so the manuscript loses its potential for impact. So those two things. And another thing that I would like to emphasize is, you know, the idea that when you are sending a manuscript to a journal, it's important to think of it as an offering. You are making an offering to the public, and so how do you make that offering in a way that really reflects your identity as a scholar? So think about it. If what you're saying is really reflective of the ways that you think about the field, you think about the particular research questions that you are investigating, and you know, you are building an identity in the field through these publications. So each one of them counts. Sometimes, you know, we are under a lot of pressure to put things out there, and so sometimes when we receive manuscripts on the other end that haven't been as well thought about because of the pressures of time and tenure and all of the things that we have to survive in academia, right? But it does reflect sometimes on your scholarship. So, you know, as Norma said, and I just want to re-emphasize that, just be sure to have the manuscript read by colleagues. You are welcome to consult with colleagues and, you know, just make a little note of thanks to those that you consulted with, and people appreciate that. And most people who are senior in the field really enjoy this part of our job, you know, to be able to support young scholars and to really promote new voices and cultivate new scholarship. And let's see, there was one more thing that I wanted to mention, but now it escaped me. But I will turn it over to Dawn.
Thank you. You, if you remember it, just pipe back up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. So thanks to Sage and Georgia State. I'm currently the editor for Teaching Exceptional Children, which is also in the field of education, specifically special education, and have been on several editorial boards for many years now. So I have been on both sides as a reviewer and an editor and an author for many years now. But citing, I do appreciate Norma and Christina's perspectives and lots to add to it. The difference between Teaching Exceptional Children and some of the other journals is it's a research to practice journal versus a journal that's accepting original research. And so again, I can't stress the importance of reading the criteria for the journal upon submission, because we don't accept original research. And again, one of the primary reasons for a desk reject on our from our journal would be people will submit original research in addition to not blinding it. So either they don't blind it or they're submitting original research. And so for research to practice journals, it's a very different type of manuscript than it is when you're writing up original research. And so sometimes it's a little bit challenging. And there is some guidance on how to write it. And so my recommendations are slightly different from Norma and Christina's in that it's really thinking about how you present your ideas and how you translate the research to practice and remembering who your audience is. And I do highly recommend that you do have additional authors on board with you, but also I recommend that you reach out to practitioners so that your manuscript has some authenticity, because your practitioners bring authentic voice to the manuscripts. And they typically in a research to practice journal article that you have some kind of case examples that kind of illustrate how you would carry out the strategies that you're describing. And a practitioner partner in authorship can help you provide that authentic description of how you would do it. And so even if they're not actually doing the actual writing, they can help provide that description. So they make really good authors or partners in that writing process. And so I would encourage you to have them a part of your team of people writing the research to practice manuscripts. So that would be my recommendation when you're writing those types. Now there's other journals out there like Teaching Exceptional Children, like Intervention in School and Clinic. I think there's a few in healthcare that are those types of articles. They're just very different types of articles. So really be mindful of who your team is who are writing those types of articles. Think about how you describe, be really precise in how you describe the evidence base. Because that section of those manuscripts is really kind of short and brief, but really clear and to the point. And then the how-to part, which is really describing step by step on how to implement that practice, is written in such a way, it's almost like a recipe book where you're really describing explicit steps to how to implement that practice so that your whoever's reading that article would be able to actually implement it in an authentic setting, so and apply it to their own practice. And so it's again a very different type of manuscript, and it takes a different way of thinking when you're writing it. So again, look at your author guidelines. And my other recommendation is to look at or review previous manuscripts that have been published, because they make really good models for how to design that type of manuscript. Because there's kind of a formula for doing it. And so you don't really want to veer from the formula too much, because typically that's what reviewers are looking for when they're reviewing the manuscript. They're looking for that type of, the same type of article. So you're either going policy to practice or research to practice, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, or some other field. So that would be my additions to what Norma and Christina have provided.
Thank you, Dawn. That was also so enlightening, because yeah, some of these journals have their particular genre, and so I remembered as you were talking, I remembered what I was going to allude to, which is if you can, before you send a manuscript out to a particular journal, sign up to be a reviewer for that journal, and so that you can gain kind of a more intimate engagement with the kind of genre, the ways that that research or practice is presented or represented in the various venues that you might find for your work. But I think that's one of the more productive exercises that you can do, you know, as a scholar, to really engage in the process of peer review.
Let's move on to some discussion on impact and promotion, if we will. But I do have one quick question that came in, and it's something I want to pivot off something Christina said about getting 500 articles. So one of our people has asked, well, since journals only accept a few articles each year, should you submit your article to multiple journals to increase your odds of being accepted? So let's just get a quick round of, and I know which way we're going to go on this. Let's get a quick round of answers. One person, Jessica, maybe you can explain why that's a bad idea, and then let's move on to impact and promotion.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, and I definitely understand why that might seem like a good idea. However, that is not something, that is not best practice, and is not in line with the code of conduct and some of the ethical responsibilities that you would have as an author. So the best practice per the COPE guidelines, the Committee on Publication Ethics, is to only submit to one journal at a time. So that's why we say really take the time to figure out that best fit. Start from there, read those papers, look to see, you know, do you actually meet their aims and scopes, tailor your manuscript accordingly. And with the ability to publish research online first, so electronic ahead of print, if it is that good fit, it doesn't guarantee acceptance, of course, but there's flexibility in terms of building up a potential backlog. So by doing that homework up front, it'll really save you time. And then if you end up getting rejected from that journal, take that feedback, those comments to heart, and help it better your manuscript, your methodology, your studies, whatever it is that you might have been the challenge or the problem when facing that rejection, and use it to better your submission and find another journal that might be a good home for that research.
Jessica, I just want I wanted that this is something that we get a lot, because, well, can I submit it to many? Okay, so let's say you submit it to 10. Let's just say I'm going to send this out. I'm going to send it out to everybody. And let's say that 10 of them say, yes, we'll accept it for publication. Then what are you going to do? Okay. The other thing is, every time you submit, there's a lot of time that goes into the review process. The editor has to look at it. The reviewers have to look at it. The processing at Sage or wherever, you know. So you're doing all that. You're giving all that time when you're gonna say, no, I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna do it somewhere else. So there is you have to sign forms and stuff saying that I have not submitted this to anybody else, that I am submitting it to this, and I'm gonna wait and hear from it. So, and I think Jessica described it. This is an ethical situation. This is an ethical process, and you know, the ethics group for publishing states this, and you can look it up. COPE, C-O-P-E, and there's a bunch of. It also talks about authorship. It's a whole webpage about ethics of publishing.
And
so can I just add one thing?
Impact and promotion.
I would just add to that you can, you know, before you send it out, reach out to the editors and ask, what is the turnaround time? Because, you know, once you send it in, your paper is there, and it could be there for a long time. So you might want, some journals are quick, some journals are a long time. And so I would encourage you to reach out to the editors before you send out and ask, you know, hey, how long does it take for your manuscripts to be reviewed and back and into publication?
Also, if you're unsure if it's a good fit just by reading the guidelines, I would also reach out to the editor. You can send them an abstract or an outline of your manuscript, and they can provide you some guidance as to whether or not it would be a good fit for the journal. So do communicate with your editors prior to submission. That will help you.
So who wants to start talking a little bit about how to get some impact once we have been published? Would like to, let's actually, Norma, why don't we start with you?
All right. So once you've been published, you want to look at, you know, what is the impact of your publication. I think Karen is going to actually talk about the impact factor, and I'm going to let her do that, but I'm going to talk about some other things real quick before. The impact factor is very important, but there's also something called the H factor. And the H factor is significant because it gives you a report of how many times your article has been cited. All right. The impact factor is the number of times the journal has been cited. Okay. A lot of people are going away from the impact factor because if I publish in JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, which is the premier, one of the premiers for healthcare, and I publish an article in there, but my article doesn't get cited one time. It's like, you know, who is this and what is she writing about? But the whole journal has been cited, compared to let me write something and Norma Quaid's publication has been cited 20 times or 30 times or 100 times. That makes an impact to nursing and healthcare in my profession. I am making an impact. Somebody is citing my work. Someone is saying, wow, what Norma did was good. And that is impacting healthcare in the long run. So the H factor is important. And the other thing that you want to do related to impact is that people need to know what you're publishing. And this is sort of a hard thing for many people to do, but you need to market your article. You need to get it out there. You need to be on social media. You need to be saying, hey, look at what I got published and this is the article and this is just giving a little brief something. Put it out on Facebook, put it out on Twitter or all the other ones that you can use. That will do it on a professional webpage. Do it in your professional organizations. If you have a Facebook for your professional organization, and say, I just wanted y'all to see this publication, and then those people can be citing your work, and then it increases your H factor, and it increases your success as a researcher. It improves your trajectory of a successful career in research. When you can say your H index was this for this article and this for this article, just like you did with your impact factor. But there's ways that you can keep up with these bibliometrics. That's what they're called, bibliometrics. And if you go to Scopus, or you can put it in Publons or LinkedIn, Kudos, ResearchGate, all of those websites, which you may not have heard about, they will publish, they show your H factor and the impact factor of the journal. And you want to find an impact factor, a journal that has a good impact factor, that's for sure, because more people will see. But your whole purpose is to get people to see what you've done and make an impact in the work that you're doing. For me, it's research. But you want to make sure that your research is changing practice and people are looking at it and you're making a good outcome. So Karen, why don't you talk about what the impact factor is, and then we can move from there.
Norma, I have to say, I think you've upstaged me a little bit. That was an excellent summary of the impact factor and impact in general in the best possible way. But just to add to that a little bit, taking a quick step back, just as a very brief summary of the impact factor, basically it is the average number of submissions one article will receive in a journal over the course of a 2-year period. It gets super complicated, but basically that is a good way to think about it, is just the average number of citations an article will receive in a particular journal. It is important. There's no getting around that. It's something that we all know about. We're obviously talking about it. Institutions look at it. It is a thing to be discussed. It's not to be ignored. That being said, I think probably most of us here would agree that it gets a lot more attention and a lot lot more spotlight than it probably deserves. There's a lot of controversy right now about whether this is the impact, or this is the metric that people should be looking at as the metric. Arguably, it's not. There are a lot of other metrics out there, including Scopus is one that a lot of folks are paying attention to. The H factor, as Norma said. At Sage, we also pay a lot of attention to alt metrics, which gives each individual article its own score. So yes, it's important, but as everyone has already kind of said this morning, it's probably more important to pick a journal that resonates with your article and that will get to that right audience. There are different ways to argue that it's in the right journal and that the article should be viewed as important by review boards or whoever else that may be important to you. But it's an important thing. It's not the only thing, I guess, is my takeaway. There are lots of really good journals out there that don't have impact factors. Clarivate, which owns the impact factor world, is only submitting, or I'm sorry, it's only accepting about 10% of the journals that apply every year right now, and it's taking them years to review applications. So there are lots of great journals out there that have applied that haven't even heard yet. So there's that. And then moving on to the thought about promoting your article, I couldn't agree more. I think it's really important for authors in this day and age to really be your best advocate. There are tons of resources out there to help you do this, so you don't have to feel like you're inventing how to do this from scratch. We have lots of resources on the Sage Author Gateway, and I'm sure there are lots of other great ones out there to help you lead the way and kind of step through that process. And in addition to that, I think I would just say, really do absolutely feel free to promote, to use your networks, to get it out on social media. We do marketing at Sage. We still have a very vibrant marketing department, but from my view, I'd say that we're good at getting in touch with a lot of people. You and your institutions will get in touch with the right people and the people who really need to read that research. So absolutely lean on them. Christina or Dawn, do either of you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that is also so helpful, really. I think the one thing that, as a Latina scholar, I would like to add, perhaps since we are speaking to affinity groups, that it is important that we cite each other, that we have enough voices in the field that are concerned and committed to similar issues for the different populations. So in addition to being cited, you also might want to consider citing each other.
Yeah, that was going to be my recommendation, is that, we all have similar works and pathways, and if you've got a group of you that are doing similar work, then it's important that you're following each other's research and also citing each other's research, and promoting each other's research, especially if you're on the same, if you're promoting yourself through Facebook or whatever social media platform you're doing, and you post yourself, then like each other and then forward each other's, so then that way you all can move forward together. And that will help get all of the research out there together. That's definitely important for everybody to help move the field forward in the research and get the research out there. So
I want
that's
to
a
add
great suggestion.
I want to add a little caveat here, a little another side of the research. Be careful about self-reporting yourself in your papers. That is not always looked very kindly. So if I wrote a paper and I put 10 of my articles in my own paper, Quayette said this and Quayette said this and whatever, it does not look very good. It's not very ethical. I know of an editor who was a theorist, and she would not accept any papers unless her theory was used in the articles that she published. Okay, this was many years ago. But you can see that her theory had hundreds of publications, right? It was just really something. But be careful about the other thing is self-plagiarizing and self-reporting. And just, again, if you look at the COPE guidelines, they can give you some feedback on that.
I think I'd like to ask some questions to the audience. We have a couple questions on the mechanics of journaling that I would like to go back to, but this just came in, and I think this is a really good, important question on impact. How important is it to the presenters, to you folks, to gain general readership? And we're talking about broader public audience, not just within the academy. Don, you talked about being practitioner oriented. So why don't we have, I'm gonna stick you with this one to start with.
Sure. I actually do, because our journal is a research to practice journal. I do like to promote our journal to a broader audience, because we're trying to, I mean, one of our primary goals of the journal is to kind of help bridge that research to practice gap. So a lot of the purposes of the journal and purpose of the article is to help provide our readership and other folks with knowledge of the evidence-based practices and research-based practices available. And so we're as a organization, as Council for Exceptional Children as an organization, is really trying to do a good job at bridging that gap. So we are doing a lot of outreach to a broader audience besides our membership. So we're working very hard to get folks in and read the journal. And so at every chance I get, I pass along articles I think are of interest to other folks, to get them involved. And I work with Karen at Sage to promote articles to different interest groups that I think might be interested in certain topics, to entice folks to come and read our journal, because I think it's a really important topic, again, to bridge the research to practice gap. So again, to get more readers to read the journal. So so that is a kind of a mission of ours, yes.
I might just add too, from an individual author perspective, that this is a pretty easy number for us to pull. And you actually can see it on our metrics page for individual articles. The number can be a little bit wonky and it's kind of all encompassing, but if you do have questions, see if you can get in touch with someone on the publisher side. The publisher can always tell you what your number of downloads is, and that as well can be a helpful number to know for review boards.
Oh yeah, that's true. I forgot about that.
Hey, for my journal, we originally were a qualitative journal. Everything was qualitative. A lot of it was qualitative. So we had ethnographers and we had historians and we had a lot of people that published in our journal. They didn't have to be nursing and they didn't have to be healthcare, but they had to discuss culturally congruent healthcare. So the other piece of that is you can tell how it reaches out to other people if you have a multidisciplinary research group or clinical practice group, and that also can be publicized through all of the other disciplines.
Mm-hmm. I can also talk a little bit about engaging in public scholarship and publishing your research or your, in lay terms, in the public media, interview with NPR and other media vehicles to disseminate your findings or your areas that you might be committed to. And that is a very effective way to, refer back to your journal articles, but also to engage in the national dialogue that is public facing and that also can impact policy if that is one of your goals.
Christine, I'm happy to hear you mention policymakers because I think that's an important part also. A couple questions on some mechanics. So someone has they've submitted something to one of your fine journals and they were rejected. And this was not a revise and resubmit, it was an outright rejection. Is there ever a situation in which the manuscript can be resubmitted to your journal, maybe with some new data or some substantial changes? And if so, what do I do?
You write a letter to the editor and you tell them, I have reworked this, I've added a different methodology, I've done this and this and this. Would you please reconsider it for a submission? So our journal does not accept rejected pubs. But if someone writes me a letter like that, and they've changed the title, even if they've totally reworked it, I will. But it usually doesn't work well, because it just doesn't work well. But I would question, why do you think that's the only journal that would want to publish your work? And that's the other thing. Don't be married to one journal. There's other journals that will want your work. And if it's not a good fit, or if they give you feedback, there's nothing wrong with going to another journal. So, but if it's a reject and they've told you that there's flaws or whatever, you need to fix them and then put them in another journal.
Yeah, typically, and I'm not saying it always happens, but typically for a research to practice journal, if it is a reject, then there's some guidance on what to do with it. So it could be that it's rejected because something was just recently published on the topic, like it's online first now. And so then the recommendation might be to submit it to another research to practice journal, or to rework it with a slightly different angle. And so in that case, the recommendation is to resubmit it with just a slightly different angle. And in that case, as an author, you have that option to resubmit it as a new submission, but you just have to have a slightly different spin on it to focus on a different topic. So it's not necessarily a total reject, even though it says reject, but it just really depends on the submission. But there are options. But again, I wouldn't be married to the journal because it may just not be a good fit. So I would look into other journals, other potential journals as options too.
Most of the time when it's a flat out reject, in my experience, it's because it's just not a good fit for the journal. And maybe reaching out to the editors and ask if they haven't provided enough feedback as to why it was rejected. You as an author have the possibility to write to them and say, hey, can I understand this better? Why was this rejected? What can I do to make this manuscript publishable? But again, most of the time, it's just because it's just not a good fit when it's flat out rejected.
So sometimes you can request a phone call or a Zoom call too, because sometimes the communication is not clear via email, just a FYI. And so sometimes it's useful to request a phone call or a Zoom call, virtual call, to help with communication. I know that has been helpful with some of the authors I've worked with, because just the communication via email has just not been very clear. And so I've set up phone calls or Zoom calls to help with communication, and it's been very helpful. So I would, as an author, I would, if the editor doesn't offer that as a suggestion, request it.
I want to bring up something real quick that we haven't discussed, and we're getting to the end, and I don't think we're going to do justice to the conversation, but it's about predatory journals and being a review for a predatory journal, a reviewer. And if you don't know what a predatory journal is, it's a fake journal. It's just not a real journal. I don't know, Jessica or Karen, can you talk about what a predatory journal is and how students can identify that once it's done? Because I think they fall into that a lot, or paying for an article when you have to pay $500 to get something published, versus why that happens, because I think that's an important issue, and I can't do it off the top of my head. Like y'all can.
I couldn't agree with you more, Norma. I think it's great that you brought that up. I think really quickly, the important thing to do here is just to do your homework. Make sure that you know where the journal is coming from. It helps if the journal is published by a reputable publisher or association, or some other organization that you trust. Also, just knowing your field and knowing the important journals in the field. If it's not a journal that you've worked with before or don't know yourself, maybe ask colleagues to see if it's someone you know. There are are very reputable open access journals in particular that do charge fees. So it's not necessarily a problem if a journal charges a fee, but it's just understanding what that fee is for, and making sure that you don't get trapped in a predatory situation where a journal is charging you just to submit, and then you just either never hear anything, or it's a pay to publish and they'll just publish anything they get. Also, actually feeding into that, it's important to know what the peer review system is, make sure that there is valid peer review, and that everything is being conducted in a very ethical type way. Jessica, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it. And Michael just shared a fantastic blog post that was published by one of our members in the open access team that has a great summary and recap of some things to look out for and how to help you avoid those predatory publishers.
I have to give y'all an example. I had a student that was a master's student, and she came to me and she was so excited that they had asked her to be a reviewer for this journal. And I said, well, honey, you've never published. What are they doing, you know? And so we looked it up, and sure enough, it was a predatory journal. She had no idea, and she was going to be listed as a reviewer, and she just thought that was great. And, you know, so just the other thing is they'll ask you to be on their editorial board, and they want your name, you know. So please be on this editorial board. And of course you think, oh, how nice that I'm being asked to be on an editorial board. So just be careful with that.
So we're running out of time, sadly. We're actually starting to get some additional really good questions. But let's say I'm just starting and I want to be a reviewer. How do will I be accepted for one if I've never reviewed before? Or conversely, how do I become a reviewer?
Y'all need to answer that because y'all have that wonderful SAGE has that wonderful program to help people become reviewers. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I can jump in here. First of all, you can reach out to the journal directly. Most editors will ask for your CV and your area of expertise to ensure that you are an appropriate fit to review for that journal. And then once you've been granted those permissions, you can be added into their submission system to become a peer reviewer. If it's your first time reviewing, I highly encourage you to check out our reviewer gateway. We have a webinar, resources, guides on how to conduct peer review. We partner with Publons, which has a fantastic academy that's free that you can take a look at to provide and receive guidance. And then maybe partner up with a mentor, someone at your institution. Maybe there's another faculty member at another institution that you work with, and ask them for guidance for the first time or two that you might be doing this peer review on your own. Most people are flattered to be asked and really want to help further the field through mentoring you and through peer review.
I'm just going to add really quickly to that most journals are really hurting for reviewers right now. So as long as it's a good fit for your expertise and experience, there's a very good chance that editors will welcome you onto the team.
Yeah, I was fixing to say, just give me a call, send me an email. I'm happy to add you to my group, and I'm actually happy to provide guidance and assistance in helping you learn how to review. So
same here.
So we're running out of time. I'm going to point a couple things. Please look in the chat, and we're posting links madly for various things so that for all the things that are coming up. A couple things, attendees will be getting an email that will have a link to the recording for this. That email will also include these links again so that you have them. Two, a special thank you to the Diverse Faculty Alliance, and they have resources too, and especially for people that are feeling unsure. It's just like you're just starting and you feel you don't have those mechanism or that network of people. The Diverse Faculty Alliance is the sort of place that you should be looking at. Even if you're outside of GSU, look for something similar in your institution. Try and find those places that do have friends and helps and network and people that you feel are like you. So that's an important thing. Three, there were for example, please explain those charges, which I think is a good question that So if you will take a look at Social Science Base, which is SAGE supported, socialscience.com. These are the sorts of things, along with this recording, that we will answers to some of these questions and have had answers, and it's a good place for people to talk. But anyway, that is about all we have time for today, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. In particular, I want to thank Dr. Bird, Dr. Edmonds that were here earlier. I want to Norma, who I want to call Doc Cellular now, but Norma Cuellar, Christina De Silva, and Don Rowe, and then my SAGE colleagues, Jessica Lepowski and Karen Schreier. So thank you all very much, and have an excellent and warm day.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.